Hi there. Today we're once again diving into a true crime case that happened right here in the U.S., one you might have never heard of. This story took place in Binghamton, New York. It's the case of Haley Anderson, with cruelty that goes beyond fiction. Listen closely to understand what really happened. Haley's body was discovered by her two closest friends. They had followed the signal from her phone to that house. They knocked. No answer. They waited. Still silence. Eventually, panicking, they climbed in through the side window. Haley's roommate was the first to see her. She froze in the doorway, then screamed. Not a high-pitched movie scream, but a broken, heavy sound like something cracked open in her chest. Haley was found on a bed that wasn't hers. The sheets were still smooth, the blanket tucked neatly, as if no one had ever laid there. On the nightstand, a lavender candle still flickered, casting shaky shadows across the walls, like the heartbeat of the girls who had just climbed through the window to find their friend. No signs of forced entry, no screams. Not a single sound had pierced the thin walls of that old rental house. Only silence, a deliberate, chilling kind of silence. Welcome to Cold Radio, where we explore the final 30 days of a victim's life before tragedy strikes. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and stay close as we uncover real cases from across the U.S. and the hidden heartbreaks behind them. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Let's continue the story. Haley Anderson, 22 years old, was just weeks away from graduation. That week, she was supposed to turn in her final paper for public health, then attend a poetry reading at her favorite cafe. Instead, she was found lying still, eyes half closed, in a room with the curtains drawn and the air thick with the scent of wax, as if someone had tried to make everything look like a peaceful sleep. Haley's lips had gone pale. Her skin was colder than usual. Her eyes were shut, but not like in sleep, more like a silence that wasn't natural, as if time had frozen. But the bruises on her neck, faint but undeniable, told the story her peaceful appearance tried to hide. Someone had come close. Someone had held her long enough to take everything away. The man who lived in that house, Orlando Tercero, had vanished. No note, no trace. Phone off, car gone. Neighbors hadn't seen him since the day before. Just hours later, police confirmed he had booked a one-way flight, not to anywhere nearby, but to Nicaragua. No one wanted to say it out loud. Not her friends, not her professors, not her mother. But everyone knew deep down this wasn't an accident. Haley didn't die in her sleep. She was murdered. And the man who did it had planned to disappear before anyone even realized she was gone. What haunts people about this case isn't just the cruelty, it's the quiet. The way everything was arranged, the candle, the untouched bed, the unshaken walls. As if someone wanted that death to look like nothing ever happened. As if silence could cover the truth. Later, police traced security footage and built a timeline that chilled everyone. After Haley entered Orlando's home, no one else came in or out. Hours later, he reappeared, calmly took the trash out, then drove away. He went to a pharmacy, bought melatonin and sleeping pills, then returned home. That night he wrote a letter in Spanish. "I'm sorry, I didn't think I could do it." And by morning, with his head bandaged, believed to be from a failed suicide attempt, he packed a suitcase and disappeared. This wasn't just a death, not a passing headline, but the collapse of a belief. That danger always comes from the shadows, from strangers. Haley knew him. She had laughed with him, trusted him enough to answer his call, even when things between them were unclear. That's what makes this story unforgettable. It wasn't hatred. It was affection, twisted into possession. And when love stops being connection and becomes control, that's when death starts counting down. Haley's death wasn't sudden. It was the result of unspoken things, crossed boundaries, apologies forgiven too easily. And in her final weeks, those closest to her began to sense something was wrong. A voice that dropped, a canceled plan, a forced smile when his name came up. Tiny warnings we only recognize when it's too late. And then begins the final month. Not just the last month of her life, but a chain of choices, moments, and cracks in trust that led to that one tragic night. To understand how a life full of light could be swallowed by silence, we have to go back. Back to the start of that month, before the tire was slashed, before the poetry reading was skipped, before the lavender candle became the symbol of everything left unsaid. Because with stories like Haley's, tragedy never starts in one night. It starts slowly, in silence. A final month no one noticed, until it was already over. Before she became a name in the news, Haley Anderson was a girl with light blonde hair that was always slightly tousled on rushed mornings, a tilted smile whenever someone told her she was charming, and a petite figure usually carrying an oversized backpack stuffed with books and fluttering sticky notes. Haley was born in Westbury, Long Island, a small, quiet town where old houses lined tree-filled streets and neighbors still paused to say hello over wooden fences. She grew up in a family that wasn't wealthy, but full of love. Her mother, Karen, was a patient woman and a former bank clerk. Her father was a mechanic. Quiet, but always there when it mattered. They didn't have much, but they had each other. From a young age, Haley dreamed of becoming a nurse, not a doctor. She once said, "Doctors diagnose, but nurses stay." That sentence made her mother laugh all summer long, surprised and proud. That little girl didn't want to stand at the front of a room teaching others. She just wanted to sit beside someone, hold their hand while they were in pain. A simple but unwavering dream. When she got her acceptance letter to the nursing program at Binghamton University, she jumped up in the living room, nearly knocking over her mom's flower vase. And throughout her 4 years of college, she never once forgot why she was there. She worked part-time at a bookstore near campus, joined a peer support group for students, and once helped an elderly woman who fell in a parking lot by laying her coat on the ground so she wouldn't be cold until the ambulance came. That story, her friend said, was so Haley. Not dramatic, not waiting for recognition. Just kindness, as natural as breathing. At school, Haley wasn't the standout in class, but anyone who knew her remembered her. She wasn't good at math, but she had a deep sensitivity to people's emotions. If you had a bad day, Haley might leave you a scribbled note saying, "You're stronger than you think today," along with a chocolate bar wrapped in newspaper. Once, she walked half a block to bring a hot water bottle to a friend with period cramps, then came back late to class without telling anyone why. These small acts, repeated over time, created a kind of presence that was gentle but irreplaceable. She lived in a shared rental house with 3 other girls, near a park, 10 minutes from campus. Her room always smelled faintly of orange essential oil. The window was framed with tiny string lights. On her desk was an old Polaroid. She and her friends laughing on the grass, hair messy, paper beer cups in hand, a pale red sunset behind them. Once she told a roommate that if she didn't become a nurse, she'd want to drive a truck across states and run a mini coffee van called Espresso for the Soul. She loved the idea of serving strangers a hot drink and a small conversation before they continued on their way. "Everyone's going somewhere," she said. "Sometimes they just need someone to stop with them for a moment, and that's enough." Her friend said Haley loved life in her own way, gently, deeply, sometimes dreamily, sometimes too vulnerably, but that's why she was so easy to love. She didn't try to fit in. She was simply herself, and people came to her. Yet it was this gentleness that sometimes made her bad at saying no. She didn't want to hurt anyone, didn't want to reject too harshly, didn't want to cut off someone who had once had a place in her heart, even when they made her uncomfortable. Her loved ones had worried about that before, but as always, she reassured them with a soft, familiar line. "I know what I'm doing." When news of Haley's death spread across campus, no one believed it. It was too sudden, too senseless. A girl just weeks from graduating, a girl planning a cross-country road trip with her friends, a girl who always replied to texts with a yellow heart emoji. How could she be gone? Back in Long Island, her mother had prepared for graduation. There was a long guest list, baby photos of Haley taped to the walls, gift boxes already packed with embroidered patches that read RN 2018, registered nurse. It was all still there. But Haley would never return. Haley wasn't a victim. She was a person. A real one. With silly habits, simple dreams, and a heart bigger than her small frame. She wasn't a statistic. She was a daughter, a friend, a roommate, an ex-girlfriend, a future nurse, and someone who left far too soon. And because she lived that way, her death couldn't just be a passing headline. That loss didn't belong only to Haley's family. It belonged to everyone who ever believed that kindness could protect us from violence. But sometimes, it's that same softness that makes people easy targets. And in those final days, Haley still believed in good. Believed that people could change. Believed that a conversation could heal pain. But the world is not always as gentle as she was. Haley Anderson's final month didn't begin with a threat, nor a fight. It began like any other month in a college student's life, with deadlines, exams, a cup of cold coffee on the desk, and messy group chats making weekend plans. But like all unease, it didn't arrive with a bang. It leaked, quietly, subtly. And no one, not even Haley, noticed. In the first week, Orlando started showing up again. At first, it seemed like coincidence. They ran into each other at the library. A casual check-in text. One night, he stopped by the house just to borrow a lighter. Haley told her roommate, eyes calm and unworried, "He probably has something going on. I should still be kind." But then the coincidences started happening more often. Orlando sat on their porch at night. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just sat there, smoking. One evening, in light rain, his hoodie was soaked. Haley didn't open the door, but she didn't call anyone either. She simply looked through the curtain, sighed, and stayed silent. In the second week, something strange happened. Kevin, Haley's ex-boyfriend, had stayed over after a party. The next morning, when they went to the car, all 4 of Haley's tires had been slashed. Not one. All 4. Evenly. As if someone had stood there for a long time, doing it deliberately. Haley froze. She didn't cry. Just quietly picked up her phone and called the police. She didn't name anyone. But in her heart, she already knew. And her friends didn't need to ask. The police came, took notes. The damage totaled over $600, enough to qualify as a felony. One officer leaned in and said, "If you just tell us a name, we'll step in right away." Haley looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "No need," she said. "It's probably just a misunderstanding." But from that day on, she started locking her bedroom door. At first only at night. Then during the day, too. She began avoiding familiar routes. She asked friends to walk her home after dark. She deleted some messages, changed her Instagram password. But she didn't cut contact. "He's just lost," she said, as if it were an illness that could be cured with kindness. By the third week, Haley started missing appointments. She didn't show up for Thursday's poetry night, even though she had said she would be there to support her friend. She didn't explain, didn't apologize, just texted afterward, "Sorry, too tired." The friend who received that message later said something felt off, not because Haley was absent, but because the message didn't sound like Haley. No emojis, no ellipses, none of the playful tone she usually used. It felt like someone trying to pretend to be Haley. That night, Haley slept on the couch, not because her room was hot, not because anyone else was staying over. She just said, "I want to be close to the door." Near the end of the week, she told her best friend something that chills people to hear now. "I think someone's been in my room while I'm at class." She said the pillow was out of place. Her perfume bottle was facing a different way. The curtain was drawn halfway instead of fully open like she had left it. Small details. Too minor to call the police, but just enough to make your heart sink. And then, the final week. Haley almost disappeared. She didn't join her study group, skipped yoga. Her texts were short. When her roommate asked, she only said, "Busy." But no one saw her study. No one saw her smile. On Wednesday night, Orlando called her. They spoke for over 30 minutes. Haley told no one, but security footage later showed her leaving the house around 1 a.m., wearing a thick coat, no makeup, no purse, just her phone in hand, and she walked into a house she would never leave again. That was the final month, the last month of Haley Anderson's life. Not a string of dramatic events, but a series of small moments, layered, building quietly like an underground current. Signs that only made sense to her friends when they sat down to piece them together after her funeral. A story without screams. No masked killer. Just a girl who thought she was strong enough to save someone, without realizing she was slowly losing herself. When police arrived at the scene early that morning, they didn't rush to make accusations. Instead, they entered with an almost reverent caution, as if each step risked disturbing something sacred. Haley Anderson was dead. That was certain. But who had killed her? No one dared to say aloud. News spread quickly, as all shocking things do in a small college town. Friends didn't believe it. Professors went quiet. The student body entered a dazed, dreamlike state. But those closest to Haley, the ones who had touched the intimate moments of her life, began to look at one another differently. The first question wasn't, who killed her? It was, who knows more than they're saying? Orlando Tercero. That name surfaced in everyone's mind immediately, like a reflex. He wasn't just the ex-boyfriend. He had once been a close friend. The guy who used to walk with Haley at parties, borrow her textbooks in nursing class, and even invited her current boyfriend into his fraternity. Their relationship was tangled. Friends didn't know what to call him. Ex, friend, or obsession. But what made things suspicious wasn't the past. It was his absence. When Haley went missing, so did Orlando. No one could reach him. His apartment was empty, phone dead, car gone. And the security camera outside the house, the one thing that doesn't lie, captured the moment Haley walked in and never came back out. Only Orlando emerged, with a trash bag, with sleeping pills in hand, with a bandage wrapped around his forehead hours later, and then with a suitcase. He didn't flee in panic. There were no signs of haste. He left as if everything had been planned in advance. Haley's family heard from police. The likely suspect had flown to Nicaragua, a country where he held dual citizenship, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. And to those seeking justice, that fact hit like a suspended sentence. But the suspicion didn't stop there. It spread like ink in water. Those who were close to Haley, who had once laughed with her, suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. Kevin, Haley's ex-boyfriend, had been the last person with her the night before she died. Were they back together? Did they argue? Was there anything off in his version of events? Haley's roommates, Josie and Michelle, had they seen anything? Heard anything? Missed a detail? Was there something they withheld from the police out of grief? In the first few days, no one was above question. Police didn't press charges. But the eyes of the community were different. Anyone close to Haley became a possibility. People began to recall the little things. A strange look from Orlando at a party. A haunting, offhand comment. If I lose Haley, what's left to hold on to? A time she said she saw him driving slowly past her house for no reason. One of Haley's friends broke down in tears. We all knew something was wrong with him, but we didn't think he'd go that far. Perhaps the most chilling words came from Haley's mother, Karen, when asked about Orlando's reaction to her daughter's death. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't offer condolences. The first thing he asked was, what did the police find in the house? Every word, every action, every silence was dissected, and under the fluorescent lights of the interrogation room emerged not the portrait of a violent madman, but of a man who had waited, who had planned, who had decided that if he couldn't have Haley, no one would. As investigators began piecing together the fragments from surveillance footage, prescriptions, receipts, handwritten letters, and movement data, they saw a picture clearer than any testimony. Haley wasn't killed in a moment of rage. She had been lured with a promise. One final conversation. One last chance to end things peacefully. But the one who made that promise didn't keep it. In that circle of suspicion, those who were once witnesses slowly became evidence. And the one who had once been a friend became the center of every nightmare theory. There are killers whose names send a chill down your spine because they are so evil, so alien, so monstrous. But there are also those who terrify us for the opposite reason, because they seem like us. Because they once smiled, once loved, once studied, once seemed like the friendly neighbor in the room next door. And then one day they strangle someone they once loved, with the same hands that just a day before had held that person in an embrace. Orlando Tercero was that kind of person. Born in Miami, raised in Nicaragua in a well-off family, a father who was a doctor, a mother who was a teacher, Orlando did not grow up in violence. He bore no early scars. On the contrary, he was raised well, did well in school, earned good grades, didn't smoke, didn't use drugs. If you didn't know better, if you hadn't seen the photo of him bowing his head in court in Managua, you'd think he was just another student, maybe even the kind of guy your mom would want you to date. Educated, attentive, with a clear path ahead. So what happened? In the files reopened after Haley's death, no one found any reports of abuse, no restraining orders, no footage of physical outbursts. But everyone who had witnessed their relationship said the same thing. Orlando couldn't let go. He loved Haley, but not in the way she needed. He loved like someone who tracked every detail, who messaged her, where she went that day, why she was online but not replying. He loved like a shadow that never left. She'd go to class and he'd show up at the library. She'd come home and he'd be sitting on the porch. She'd smile at someone else and he'd go silent. It wasn't control through yelling. It was manipulation through silence, through a look that made her feel guilty just for wanting freedom. Haley once told a friend, "He's not doing anything wrong, but I always feel drained around him." It was the kind of relationship you can't quite name, but your body knows something's off. Orlando wasn't a man of violent bursts. He was someone who nurtured hurt like a pet, feeding it, tending to it, letting it grow into a quiet rage. A rage that didn't explode, just waited for a justification. When Haley told him they needed to end things for good, he didn't shout, didn't throw things. He just nodded and started planning. What made this crime so chilling was his calmness. The way he left everything intact, the half-burned candle, the neatly arranged pillow, the clean room, the unlocked door, as if even death had to be staged to fit the image he wanted to keep of her. No chaos, no blood, just breath, gone. In testimonies, friends said he had threatened suicide if Haley ever left. Once he called her in the middle of the night and said that if she didn't come over, he would do something terrible. She went. Not out of love, but out of sympathy. And because she still held on to that last shred of hope, that someone who had once been her friend, her boyfriend, couldn't really harm her. But Orlando didn't see Haley as a person. He saw her as an extension of himself. And when she pulled away, when her eyes no longer belonged to him, he felt himself disappearing. He couldn't stand that. Later, psychologists would describe Orlando's behavior as indicative of obsessive-compulsive possessiveness, but refined. He didn't lose control. On the contrary, every move showed deliberation, inviting her over late at night, choosing a moment when no one would be around, going to the pharmacy to buy sleeping pills, as if to prepare for the final act. This wasn't the crime of someone who lost their mind. It was the crime of someone who couldn't accept being left. And perhaps the most frightening part of this story is that many have seen a little bit of Orlando in themselves, or in an ex, or in a friend who just wanted to clear the air. We've all thought, jealousy is normal. Checking in means you care. Losing sleep over someone means you love them. But sometimes, that's the beginning of something far darker. A love that demands no consent, that knows no limits, that refuses to be denied, is not love. It's possession. Haley didn't see it for what it was, or maybe she did, but not strongly enough. Like so many young women, She believed she could save someone by simply listening. She showed up that night and never came back. Police called it evidence. Prosecutors called it a coherent timeline. But for Haley's family, it was just a series of cold fragments, numbers, video clips, receipts, handwritten letters, pieced together into a picture of the moment their daughter was killed in a room she never intended to sleep in. A camera at the front door captured Haley entering Orlando's house late on the night of March 8th. She wore a gray hoodie, held her phone in one hand, her hair loose. There was nothing unusual in her stride. No fear, no hesitation. She believed she could have one last conversation to bring closure to what once was. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. Orlando left the house for the first time around 7 a.m. the next morning. He took out a trash bag, clean clothes, and wore a calm that was almost eerie. He then went to a nearby pharmacy and purchased Zizquil and melatonin, sleep aids. No one knows what he intended to use them for, but the cameras show him returning home and staying for several more hours. He wrote a letter. In it, he said, "I'm sorry. I never thought I could do that." Then he packed a suitcase, wrapped the wound on his forehead, believed by police to be the result of a failed hanging attempt, and drove straight to JFK Airport. The flight took him out of the United States, beyond the reach of U.S. law, to a place he thought he would never be tried, Nicaragua. As a dual citizen, Orlando knew the system. The U.S. has no extradition treaty with Nicaragua. If he stayed put, he would be safe. But what he didn't account for was the determination of a mother who had lost her child. Karen Anderson didn't cry on national television. She didn't organize public vigils. Quietly and patiently, she worked with the district attorney's office, compiled documents, contacted the press, and pressured both governments. She didn't ask for revenge, only one thing: justice. Eventually, after months of diplomatic tension, the Nicaraguan government agreed to something unprecedented: to try a murder case that took place in the U.S. with an American victim, under their own laws. Orlando Tercero was charged with femicide, a special charge used to describe the killing of a woman by someone close to her. The trial was live-streamed from a courtroom in Managua to the district attorney's office in Broome County. It was the first time Karen saw him, through a screen. He didn't bow his head. He didn't cry. Orlando sat there calmly, as if waiting for roll call in an old college class. Haley's closest friends took the stand. Josie spoke of the uninvited visits. Kevin talked about the slashed tires. Police presented the footage. The forensic pathologist read the cause of death: strangulation. Orlando's defense lawyer argued a feeble claim: that he suffered a temporary mental break, that he was drunk, that he remembered nothing. But there was no toxicology report, no hard evidence. No one believed it. The court denied a second psychological evaluation. And then, it was Karen's turn to speak. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She spoke about her daughter, about her dreams, about the times Haley helped the homeless, about the graduation party she had planned 2 months in advance. And then she looked straight into the screen, her voice calm, like a whisper. "I hope you spend the longest time possible behind bars. Because you didn't just kill my daughter. You killed a part of my family. And no one will ever be whole again." Just an hour and a half later, the judge returned to the courtroom. No need to wait until the next day. She sentenced Orlando Tercero to 30 years in prison, the maximum sentence under Nicaraguan law. The sentence was carried out immediately, but for Haley's family it wasn't the end. Her seat at graduation remained in the center of the hall, marked by a small photo and the honorary diploma her father stepped forward to accept. That father said, "I just want to feel like a part of her is still with me." That mother still keeps her daughter's ashes in the old bedroom, still lights a candle every night, still folds the blanket, just the way Haley used to. And for us, those who never knew her, we're left with a quiet question: can someone love another person So much they kill them just to keep feeling needed? Or was that love never real to begin with? Haley's story ends with a sentence, but the loss does not. Because the most terrifying things aren't in the acts themselves, but in the ways we overlook the signs we thought were harmless. If you saw yourself in this story, leave a comment, even just a line. I'm still listening. That's how people like Haley are not forgotten. Thank you for staying with Cold Radio. We'll see you again in another final month.